to hear other people's stories told in a language not of your own, about a place that's not of your own, in ways that you would have never thought of, because how could you? That's not your environment. But the thing that I found so fascinating at the root of it is an expression I always like to say after all those years, is the idea that we're so completely different. And the idea of it's like, we're all the same. No, we're completely different. But we're also incredibly similar too, at the same time. So it's the ability of, you got to have the two thoughts in your head kind of thing. You can't just see the differences and focus on that. It's alienating. But you can't just focus on how similar you are too, because then you're going to miss out on the beauty of those differences, how fascinating it is to see a person like, you're just as human as me. You feel what I feel, but just in a completely different way, or in a completely different environment, economically, socially, whatever. And it's it was addictive. For me, I can't stop. And I mean, I'm lucky too, because growing up in Toronto, in the Scarborough area of Toronto too, especially, is I was always around people of different cultures. I was used to that. Like, that to me was my normal. Being on a bus where you hear 10 different languages, seeing people of every skin tone you can think of every religion, of everything. This was normal. And I think that's what makes people here from Toronto and St. Catharines and all over the province, most of the country, for instance, it gives us such a leg up in knowing how to adapt to other people, to be open to it.
Welcome, everyone, to the podcast. I have a guest with me today, and excited to have Jonathan with me today. Jonathan is an author, and he also is a traveler of the world, which I admire as well. So Jonathan's with us. And Jonathan, great to have you on the podcast. Thank you for making time for us today. How are you?
I'm good. It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me on the Next Chapter podcast. I'm really excited to be here, and looking forward to a really interesting conversation with you, Dave.
Awesome. And we had a pre-interview a little while back, and you shared a little bit about your journey around the world. And I'm curious, can you let people know, like, you're in Ontario, Canada with me right now, but you have sights on returning back to where you were living for quite a while as well. Can you share a little bit about that?
Of course. Writing for me professionally started about 2015, but before that, I was like any writer, unknown, unpublished, and just trying to go page to page, so to speak. But a lot of that took place in Mexico, where I lived for about 10, 11 years. Also lived in Argentina for a couple of years. So the journey there started with leaving a job I had with an airline. And that job enabled me to fly to places I never would have thought I would ever go. And that became addictive. So then just hopped in a car when me and that job, the relationship kind of soured. And I hopped in an old 92 Camry with about 300,000 kilometers on it. And everyone thought I was nuts. Nobody thought the car would make it. Even the mechanics who fixed it said it probably won't make it. It made it. With no problem, just kept driving for about 4 days until the language changed. It even made it back too, by the way. Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing. Okay, so would you like to I love this. Can you welcome our guests who are maybe listening to us in Mexico, Argentina? Can you just give them a little welcome? Because you speak the language, you live there, you're part of the culture. I'd love it if you kind of just welcome people to the podcast. That'd be great.
Ay, por supuesto, por todos mis amigos allá en México, si están escuchando a mí, muchísimas gracias. Extraño tu país y no puedo esperar hasta que pueda regresar. Ay, no mames, extraño México mucho. Y por mis amigos allá en Buenos Aires, nunca que puedo pronunciar Buenos Aires, perdóname, pero me encanta mucho Buenos Aires. Extraño el estado. Extraño muchas las cosas allá en el sur.
Oh my gosh, it sounds amazing. Like, oh my gosh, wow. I shut my eyes, Jonathan, and I've just traveled. That's great. It's so great.
Those two countries have showed me a lot of love. They taught me more than any classroom ever did. They embraced me, showed me a lot. Third of my life has been spent in Latin America. They gave me more stories than I could write in several lifetimes. So I'm going to try.
Tell me more. Tell me more about the people. I love it.
People are people. I've never really liked the idea that there's always a funny kind of thing when you meet people from other places that talk about people from other places. I always love one where you hear somebody from another country and they're like, "Oh, in my country, we love food." Everyone loves food. I've yet to be in a place where somebody's like, "We don't love food in our country." That country's probably not going to last very long.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
when it comes to the individuals in those places, what I found, I never like to generalize too much, but just the warmth. It was real. It's not like the description you hear when someone's at a resort and they're just like, the people are so nice. Well, yeah, they're paid to. You're tipping. It's a different vibe versus when where you're living in the neighborhoods where those workers live.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
you realize that warmth isn't for tips. That's who they are. There's just the sense of community. It comes culturally. It comes from bigger families, of course. There's so many factors that influence it, and that was something different. I mean, we're both Canadian, right? We're both from Ontario. A lot of people could easily say, like, we're sometimes, people we're polite. It's please, thank you, I'm sorry, excuse me, of course, but we reflect our weather. We're a little cold, we'll be nice to you. We won't slam a door in your face. We'll just say, could you please vacate the premises? Thank you very much. I'm sorry if it bothers you. Yeah. Whereas where I was for all those years, it was real, where people would come in, have some food with us, but not just eat and go. It was talk and talk. And it was those types of conversations that it made the first year frustrating because I couldn't really speak the language. I didn't speak a word before I went there. So
Wow.
I would hear everyone talking and I would try. And the whole time I keep telling myself, like, I'm not stupid. Please, I just don't know the words. So I would have to learn and learn and learn. But I wanted to learn. And I wanted to learn because I could see how engaging the conversations were, from the eye contact, it was just more personal and it was so much warmer. And I miss that. And that's why I'm going to go back to it in other countries in the region. And so it was just the warmth is what I would describe it the most.
So,
and a lot of passion.
I love that. So expanding our world, Jonathan, I think that it feeds into our creative juices, right? We can tap into that. We see beyond ourselves. We see beyond our culture that we were raised in, and we experience other cultures. We experience the passion that they have, and just being a part of someone else's story, I think, makes us a better writer. Would you agree with that?
I think it makes you a better person. But in terms of being a better writer, absolutely. To me, that just almost, it's a great consolation, because to improve yourself as a person, it'll improve. I don't care if you're an athlete or a chef or an accountant. If you're improving yourself as a person, I do think you'll be better in all of those things. But because, this is a writing podcast and we're going to talk about writing and literature much too, it definitely helps. It helps so much, because to hear other people's stories told in a language not of your own, about a place that's not of your own, in ways that you would have never thought of, because how could you? That's not your environment. But the thing that I found so fascinating at the root of it is an expression I always like to say after all those years, is the idea that we're so completely different. And the idea of it's like, we're all the same. No, we're completely different. But we're also incredibly similar too, at the same time. So it's the ability of, you got to have the two thoughts in your head kind of thing. You can't just see the differences and focus on that. It's alienating. But you can't just focus on how similar you are too, because then you're going to miss out on the beauty of those differences, how fascinating it is to see a person like, you're just as human as me. You feel what I feel, but just in a completely different way, or in a completely different environment, economically, socially, whatever. And it's it was addictive. For me, I can't stop. And I mean, I'm lucky too, because growing up in Toronto, in the Scarborough area of Toronto too, especially, is I was always around people of different cultures. I was used to that. Like that to me was my normal. Being on a bus where you hear 10 different languages, seeing people of every skin tone you can think of every religion, of everything. This was normal. And I think that's what makes people here from Toronto, and St. Catharines and all over the province, most of the country, for instance, it gives us such a leg up in knowing how to adapt to other people, to be open to it. And so I was looked at just growing up as something that was just a logical step to then, well, I want to go to the countries where all my friends and all these people who I grew up with, where their families were from, where their cultures were. So I started going there. And then I was like, this is amazing as I'm traveling with the airline. But it wasn't enough. I was just like, well, I don't want to just glimpse it. I want to live it. So I did that. And now I want to do it more. I don't think I'll ever stop. I can see myself being a 70, 80-year-old guy with a walker, probably going somewhere new and just going, this is great. And I love it.
That's amazing. And I love how you've expanded that beyond just writing, Jonathan. That's very wise. And you're right that when you experience culture like that, it impacts every part of you. It doesn't matter what your creative outlet is. It changes you, right? And I love that.
Absolutely. And it's a change that is for the better. It adds layers to you. You said wise, and thank you for that. But so much of that wisdom came from being around other people, from listening. From, like they say, a great writer, to me, you have to be a great reader. And I think also, just to be a good storyteller in general, you better be a good listener. If you don't know how to listen, if you don't know how to take in what people are telling you or take in what you see and absorb it all. Like personally for me, I love being an observer. I love attention once in a while, but I love being an observer. Just walking around for hours, sitting somewhere, just taking it in and just seeing the details. And I hope that, I think it does, where it goes into my work, where I like details, those little things that make it come to life.
I can picture you sitting at a cafe, watching people go by, people watching, and picking up on the little things that you see in life. And then again, taking that and bringing that into your writing.
I gotta take away from the cafe part. I hate coffee. So.
Oh, really? Okay. Yeah. A little restaurant, a little snack. I just said that little.
I actually like to walk around people. I don't like to sit too much, a little antsy. But no, the sentiment you're describing is exactly true. But I like to ingratiate myself. I like to walk around. I like to be on a subway. I like to be on a bus, or I like to just be walking through a crowded street and just kind of taking it in while making sure I don't bump into something. But I like to be in it. I like to feel really in it. Or a bar. A bar is a great place. I've learned more in bars than I have in anywhere else. People are a little more honest. It's just, bars to me are, I would tell anybody, if you want to travel and you're of age, if you want to travel and really learn about a culture, go to a bar. Don't get drunk and stupid. Just, have some drinks, talk to some people. It's a bar to me it's like an embassy without the formalities. And it's a cool place. I've been to bars around the world and I love going to them. I'll go by myself a lot. And you just get a drink, sit at the bar, talk to the bartender, look around, and you'll be surprised how many times people will, approach or, look, especially when you're in a foreign place. The novelty plays a part, of course, but that's just your in. Use it. If you're not interesting, it won't matter how much of a novelty you are. But I have made so many friendships, connections. I've had many adventures, all just from sitting in a bar.
I love that you're not a casual observer. You're living life. I love it. It's beautiful.
Yeah, I like to be in it, but I still observe. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's talk about your literary journey. How many books do you have currently out there in the world?
4. I've had 4 books published. Yeah. And
your genre, like where are you writing? What's your strengths?
Genre-wise, I've been all over the place. I've written horror, really hardcore horror, because I always kind of like that. I've written nonfiction novel kind of stuff. I've written young adult. I really like writing dramatic fiction, kind of, I guess you could say contemporary. I've always had a problem with genre. Like, it's so important, especially for any writer who's ever queried. It's so critical. It's just like, you got to be able to pinpoint your genre. And I admire the people who be like, oh, I write in fantasy, da da da, and they can be so specific. I really wish I could. But for me, I like telling a story that I'm passionate about, that I wake up every day and want to tell and write 1,000 words every day. But it never really fits because I'm trying to tell stories based on reality. But so I guess whatever, like, I don't do fantasy. It's not my thing. For all those who do, that's awesome, but it's not for me. I like stories that are reality based, but I also like to use a lot of imagination. So I'll say mostly contemporary or nonfiction influenced.
I love it. What about an author
answer.
That's great. No, I love it. What about an author that inspires you? You talked about
there's too many.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. There's so many. And not just authors. For me, I go by storytellers. I mean, I've been as inspired by Joseph Heller and Juan Rulfo and Gabriel Marquez and Dante and just Tolstoy and Dostoevsky as I have been Wu-Tang Clan and Nas and Weird Al Yankovic and Jay-Z even.
Nice.
Or just, I mean, all over to me. Just good storytellers. Or Victor Jara or just people from different places in the world, just real great stuff. Stanley Kubrick. Like, the list goes on. Anytime I'm engaged in a great story, they inspire me.
It's great.
That's a long list. If on my website, I always kind of enjoy it where I put a list of some, and it's a big paragraph. And periodically, I like to add to it whenever a new book I read or movie or music I hear, and I'm just like, ooh, I'm going to put them. Like, I just want to show them love because, they inspire me a lot. And dozens, hundreds of people whose names I might not remember, who I've met in those bars I mentioned, sat on buses and just had conversations with, who told me their stories. Just anywhere I can snatch a story, I'm inspired by it when it's good.
So how would you encourage somebody to share their story?
I've always admired the art of conversation. I think Oscar Wilde was probably one of the best in it, in English at least. In the sense of people like to tell their stories, but they do. I mean, unless it's a real introvert and somebody very private, and that's fine. But I find a lot of people love telling their stories, and most of it is just let them, but also show interest. It's one thing if you tell me your story and you're gazing away, you're not making eye contact, or you're on your phone or whatever. Give people that attention and show you care, show you're relating to it, add in something to it. And before you know it, a couple of hours can go by. I've had that happen more times than I can count. The key is listening, really keen listening, because if you're going to ask a question which feeds a story, I mean, to me, a question is fertilizer, it feeds it, but it has to be a good question. It has to be a question that couldn't be asked in any other circumstance but that one, based on that story at that moment. If you do that, people pay attention to that. They understand, whoa, this person's really engaged. And in turn, they're just going to keep giving you their stories. And to me, it's addictive. It's great. I love hearing other people's stories. It's so stimulating. And then from there, I'll come up with my own, or they'll ask me for mine. And now you're having this glorious exchange, because both people are invested. To me, that's the richness in conversation. It's what I seek all the time.
Interesting. So I'm hearing connections with culture. I'm hearing connection with travel, connection with people, many things that seem to light you up. Authors, obviously. Is there something completely unrelated that also inspires you in life in general?
I love hearing Celtic music.
Wow.
There's a lot of music. Yeah, I like hearing Baltic music too. I love hearing music from the Balkans, Celtic music. I was in Newfoundland recently, and I have a lot of family there, and I didn't know about it, and so that was amazing. I felt the kinship. And I had my uncle, my great uncle, he performed some songs. I mean, the Irish influence is obvious with so much of Newfoundland, but just I'll change it from Celtic, just like the Atlantic, just the whole from Europe to Canada, that Atlantic And hearing that music there, and you hear the accent to it, but you hear the quirk. It's just the individuality of it, the specificity of it. And music from Latin America, of course. Music from Nigeria, I find really great. Music from Greece. Like, you just hear music. It doesn't even have to have words. And if it does, I probably won't understand them. I don't care. It's just when you can feel that passion in it. And I'm awful at music. I couldn't create music if a gun was put to my head. Like, I can't draw. I can't do any of these arts, but I love them. And the same is with art too. I love sketch. I love Francisco Goya's work. I went to the Prado in Spain and blew my mind. So just like any expression, like passionate of like stories and things like that, even if I can't relate to it, even nothing, I love that. And to be completely outside of the box, I am just now kicking an addiction to children's cereal. I'm really getting better with it. I used to eat 2-3 boxes a week. I'm down to 1. Yeah. And now I've cut it out too, where it used to be the real bad ones, like Fruit Loops with marshmallows, like just the stuff that a dentist would burn in a bonfire. Yeah. Sugar on top of sugar. They might as well just pour a bucket of sugar in your mouth. So I'm just like, okay, this got to stop. I just turned 40. No more of this. Yeah. So now I'm still eating my cereal though, but now I'm more to the beige colors, the corn pops, the things like that. I'm not going to Shreddies. That's not cereal. It's mush. But
we all have limits. We have limits. Yes.
Right. Like I'm in that happy middle ground. Like it might not be Fruit Loops with marshmallows, but little Apple Jacks at night to kind of give you a little snack. It's all right. So that's lifelong. And when I'm in other countries though, I'll kick it because I'm not paying $10 for a exotic box of cornflakes. And I won't do it.
So that would define you as a cereal writer then, I guess. Would that be correct then?
You could say that. Hey, you always hear the stories about the guy with the whiskey, right? And the smoke, the cigarette and the whiskey. Well, I don't smoke and I can't work while drinking. So there's a good chance there's a box of cereal and those bags of milk that only us Canadians know about.
There you go.
And everyone else thinks is nuts. Yeah. So I'll always have a 3 bag of milk in my fridge and a box of cereal on top. Always.
I love that. And somebody right now is going, what's a 3 bag of milk? And I love that. That's kind of our Canadianisms here, right?
I think it's more efficient. I do. I mean, you got your container, you put your bag in, you smack the bottom of that thing like it owes you money, and you cut off the top corner there and you go to town. I mean, you see all these boxes or these big plastic. No, man, just in a bag, slap it in, go for it. Love it.
So this podcast is brought to you by breakfast cereal and breakfast in general. So we're so happy we're gonna have to get a sponsor now that we've talked about all this.
Any cereal company, I will do really irresponsible things if a cereal company wanted to sponsor me.
There you go. I love it. So let's share a little bit about your most recent book. I'd love to kind of get in a little bit of that as well. Let's talk about why you wrote your most recent book that's out there.
There it is.
Kind of like, let's talk a little bit of the story about there it is. Put it up again. I love that. Share a little bit about this. There you go. Wedlock. Very nice.
Yeah. Thank you. So I'm really happy with this cover. I want to give a little shout out, so to speak, for Jonathan Arevalo out of Colombia. He made this cover. He did an amazing job, and I love it so much. There's nothing that feels better when you have a cover in your mind and you tell an artist about it. This has happened for actually pretty much a lot of my covers. Just to give another cover, this is my 3rd book, The Spirit of Laughter.
Nice.
Same thing here. And just to tell artists, like, okay, so this is what I imagine. I write it in a paragraph. I'm really specific. And then they create it. And it's exactly what you saw in your brain. And in the case of Wedlock, a little better. And so it just immediately was just like, oh, perfect. And a little back and forth, but no big changes. But yeah, so the cover to me he even added some cool things with the background and everything. But yeah, he did a great cover. Really love it. The story was, it was one of those books that I started when I first moved to Mexico City, when I drove down about 12, 13 years ago. I always kind of missed the time. It was more than a decade. And I lived in a little apartment in the Tláhuac neighborhood of Mexico City. It's in the top of the hills there. And a little tough to get to. It was cheap, but whatever. It was fine. I was there for a summer, and I wrote the very first draft of the book. This book is nothing like the first draft, but it's been worked on periodically every few years. I'd write it, but the idea never changed. This idea of what happens when it's just about possession. Like when you have a man who just believes his woman is a possession, a trophy. But I wanted to take it not so much sleeping with the enemy type thing and just kind of, evil bad man keeping woman down who's clearly a victim and everything that happens. But I wanted to dig deeper. I wanted to get into the notion of what if he really loves her? Genuinely. Like he really does. And he really does want to keep her safe. And like he means so well. And I found that when you really root it in the best intentions, the results can become far more catastrophic and worse, and your imagination can really go because you're so blinded to how twisted your actions are when your intentions are genuinely good and rooted in love and rooted in protection. And for the main characters, the woman's name is Elena and the man's name is Diego. Diego really loves her, and he grew up around seeing guys he grew up with mistreating women. That macho, that machismo that is so prevalent in Latin America. And it's prevalent throughout the world. It just shows itself in different forms. Some places it's more subtle. Some places it's more economic. Some places it's more brazen. In some places it's more culturally. And like it exists everywhere. It just shows itself different. But when I was in Latin America, I got to see that region, that culture's version of it. And it was very brazen. And it was very taught. You could tell this is generational. This is not something that just is new. It's not like, it started in the 50s. This goes back to colonial time and pre-colonial and especially post. And so I wanted to take it from a sense of this Diego character. He saw it and is like, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to be a better man. And when I find a woman I love and a woman I want to protect, I'm going to protect her. And he does. He just does it I don't want to do any giveaways of the story, but he does it in a way that's like fanatical, but no one can see it. And for the woman, Elena, she's young. She goes to the city. She's realizing that she probably can't make it on her own money-wise, and it's just so sprawling. And so she's just caught in this web. And for her, I wanted to explore the conflict from the woman's point of view. And I've known a lot of women, both there, here, and a lot of places that have been in these toxic relationships. But it gets more difficult when they're grilled about it. They're like, what, does he hit you? No. Does he verbally abuse you? No. Does he hold you hostage? No. He doesn't do any of those, like those buzzwords that immediately say abuse and evil, and it's easy and cut and dry. It's that gray area. They're like, no. And then they start questioning themselves. So it's like, well, no, he doesn't do those things. He does love me, so is it my fault? Am I wrong for thinking this is a toxic relationship? Should I almost recede and appreciate it more? So the whole book, the story, is about that. But I also add in I add in a Black Mirror-like atmosphere to it, where technology is involved. And then I set it in this sprawling Latin city with all the details that I remembered from Mexico City. I didn't want to say the city specific because I didn't want to put it in one place because I think it's applicable to so many places. And so I put that all together, and I wanted to create something that would really just swallow the reader. Just get them in this world of just like, God, what would you do if you were her? What, like, is he bad? You want to hate this guy, and he is worthy of some hatred. He's not a good man for what he did, but you kind of get why he's doing it. And it's just, I wanted you to empathize with this, lack of a better word, a lunatic, but he's surrounded by all these reasons. And so I really wanted to dig into the nuance of it. So that's why I probably wrote it 5-6 times over 10 years. Because each time I'll be like, oh, no, I want to change this. I don't really like what this did, or I went too far here. So to finally see it published after all that time, just that on its own means a lot. And to hear when people read it, they like it, means even more. So yeah, that's
and
wedlock.
that's interesting. I love hearing that story, because when we see a book on a shelf in a store or online, we don't know the author's journey. Like, how long did this take to write, and the passion and the story behind the story and all that information. That's why I love having this kind of conversation, is now as a reader, we have a better appreciation for your journey. And now as we pick up the book and open the covers, we kind of we come with knowledge as a reader, and I can appreciate the story in a new light, knowing what we know now.
Glad to do it.
That's amazing.
Well, I love hearing it too. Whenever you hear those old retrospectives on classic albums and you hear about the band or artist talking about how they created the songs of the album, or when you read biographies, like I remember reading one relatively recently about Graham Greene, and he's written 3 biographies, but with the career like he had, I get it. And so he wrote one, and in this one, he just covered some of his books, but the most well-known, like The Power and the Glory, The Honorary Counsel, The Comedians, like those classic books that people really know of him, or like Our Man in Havana, just those great books. And each one he would dedicate maybe 20 pages to tell the story of what went into it. Like The Comedians, he went to Haiti, and then he was angry about what Papa Doc was doing to the people at the time. For anybody that doesn't know who Papa Doc is, learn your Haitian history. It's incredibly interesting, and it goes right back to their revolution, which is fascinating. And he was there, so he wanted to write a book to kind of go at it, so to speak. And then with The Power and the Glory, he was in Mexico. Like, he was in these places, then you tell these stories based on it, but he gave the background behind it. I mean, that guy lived a life that I admire and I hope to live my own version of. But so to be able to do it myself is actually really cool. I enjoy it.
Tell me about how you do character development for your books. What's your process? Like, have you actually met the characters in your book before you write, or have you met your characters after you've written the book? I'm interested to hear your perspective on character development.
I think it comes both in the terms of the plot and the character. I'll usually start with an idea. I usually start all the books I've written, short stories as well that I've had published. I usually start with a what if. Like, what if this happened? Or what would happen if this and this I always kind of like to start with a question. And if it's an engaging question to me, I'll explore it a little. And then from there, well, what kind of people would this involve? And it just kind of germinates from there. So for the characters, they kind of develop in accordance with the story. But then at some point, because you don't want the story to dictate the characters too much, because then they just become two-dimensional. And so then I usually go back to the question. The question usually stems from something I've seen. Like, it's always based in reality. It's a situation I've been in or something someone's told me. Like, it's never just an out of the blue. Like, what would happen if rabbits could fly? Not so much. It usually comes from a real situation and things I've seen. So the essence of the character is already there. And then as I build the plot, I'll dig deeper into that specific type of character. And then I'll go back through the memory banks. Like, who do I know was like this? And if I can still talk to them, I'll talk to them. If it's a character I invent, I will integrate myself more, like I said, in the bars or whatever, just to get a feel of these people. And then I like to ask questions. I'll go up to people. I'm like, I'm writing this story and I have this character idea. Would this fly? Because you're in the kind of situation I'm describing, or maybe you know someone who is. Does this seem realistic to you? Would they do this? And I get so much feedback. Because people love doing that, I find. You don't really get the, I don't care, I don't want to help. No, people love it when you're in a good conversation. So I always get so much insight. So I kind of just let it build. I always figure every character I create is a composite of a ton of people. But each one of those people is an individual who gave me a sincere answer or a sincere expression of who they are. So they're real people. It's just a whole lot of real people in one or two or however many. And so, I mean, the one time I've done nonfiction is a book I've just recently finished. And that one I'm trying to get out there as best I can. That was based on real people. And so It was interviews. It was talking to them. But some of them have recently passed away. So I had to reference their diaries that I was lucky enough to be given. And then also my own personal memory and combine that into what I believe this person would have thought. And then that's rewarding when people who knew them read that and say, yes, that is what they were thinking at that time, or that's what they would have thought, or that's how they were, even though I wasn't around to see it. So it's that construction. And I find that comes with the more you're around people, the more you listen to people, talk to people, connect with people, be it observing or interpersonally. However, I'm more of an observer than I am a close type person. It's just how I am. But I observe really thoroughly. I really love paying attention. And so with my characters, as they develop, I always try to do it as realistically as I can. Like, there are some times where I'll be like, I really want the character to do this because it would be cool. But they wouldn't. Because based on everything I know, that character wouldn't do that or act that way. Or sometimes they'll do something that would be considered unorthodox. Like, no, who would do this? Well, this character would, because of what I believe and know and studied and put into it. So I've put a lot into it, but they're usually always composites.
Amazing. So, Jonathan, what's coming up next for you? Like, what are you excited about? What's in the hopper?
Well, right now, the book I just mentioned, it's called The Heroes We Get, The Heroes We Want and The Heroes We Get. That book is a nonfiction novel I worked on for a good year and a half. It's based on my stepbrother who recently passed. His name was Joey Fillion. He was, in 1988, he was the second most famous Canadian in the world. Not many people know about this, especially being so many years. It's pre-internet, pre-everything. And he was famous because he survived a house fire that burned 98% of his body, which nobody has ever survived. But he did, and he was only 15. And so he's the reason a whole lot of surgeries in North America that have to do with skin grafts, all of this stuff, he was the guinea pig. And I was 6, 7 years old at the time when this happened. So I remember seeing it as a child. And my father, who married Joey's mother, was with him. So I got that perspective. And so it's a family drama. But it's also about this miraculous kid who, I mean, he had about hundreds of surgeries. Each time it would be, your son's going to die, to his mother. Like, he has 5% chance. And he keeps surviving. And I remember him telling me his stories. Joey would tell me. He would tell me about out-of-body experiences. I can't. If somebody was to tell me about out-of-body experience, usually, but when a guy like that tells you, you have to, not necessarily believe it. It's not about that, but you have to take it a little seriously. And so I did. And he told me that, but there's so much depth to the book because it's not just about his survival. The first quarter of it is, but it's about the 30 years that came after and how he was more famous, not so much for just surviving the fire, but because the media at the time, be it the Toronto Star, the Sun, everywhere, the news, all of it in Canada and abroad, made him out as to be a hero, that he ran back in the house valiantly to save his mom and to save his brother. There's some truth there, but not the way they did it. And so when he survived his surgeries, he was bombarded. He was getting letters from Brian Mulroney. He was getting letters from the Queen, Michael Jackson, all these people. And the pressure he was under to have to live up to this. And he was a kid. And he was hopped up on morphine for a year. It was ridiculous. Yeah. And they chewed him up. And then they spit him out after. And the things that happened involved, he was kidnapped by a cult leader who happened to be his dad. He was taken in by a community that wouldn't leave him alone. It was insane. And yet he lived to be 48 years old. He shouldn't have survived that day. And the story really dives into the questions, hard questions. What if he didn't survive? Would things have been better off? His younger brother passed away under very tragic circumstances, directly involved with Joey's survival. His mother passed away because stress and just so much attached to it. I mean, this story was there was so much to it. And my father told me, he's like, you need to write this. You're the only one who can really write this. You know this. And it's so I went to Vancouver Island for like 6 months, locked myself in a little room at my uncle's, and had stacks of newspaper articles from the 80s, putting it all together, interviewing my dad, reading diaries, getting all of this and putting it together. I loved it. It made me really, really appreciate nonfiction. So that book is finally finished, and I'm querying that right now. No bites so far. So any agents or publishers, hey, I'm trying.
Nice.
Other than that, I'm working on a play for the Spanish book I've released called Gato y Lobo. I show that to everybody.
There you go. I love it. Yes.
That's in Spanish. That's being promoted in Mexico right now. It's been read in schools. Kids seem to really love it. That's based on a real story. So I'm working on a play that in English, because I think the story is really relevant and could appeal to a lot of English speakers, to give them an idea of being a teenager in Mexico and what it's like for them, and that there are similarities but differences too. So I'm keeping real busy.
Jonathan, let's jump back to the beginning of let's jump back to the beginning of our discussion, when you said you went down there to Latin America and you didn't know the language, and you're frustrated because you want to be part of the conversation, but you can't because you just don't know. And now you have books published, children reading them in that country. Like that's outstanding to hear the journey of someone that loves to immerse themselves in the culture, in the people, and the life, and not just be a casual observer, but do life with people and connect in the bars, elbows to elbows. Like, I love that kind of journey. That's beautiful.
It's more fun. Casual observing, cool. But I like to be in it. But to be fair, for Gato y Lobo, I would love to take credit and say I wrote it in Spanish. I can't write in Spanish. It was translated, but it was written there. I was told the story. It's based on a real story. A teacher told me. She told it to me in Spanish. Beautiful. Everything was there. But then I wrote it in English because the only author I've ever heard of who was able to write in a second language brilliantly was like Joseph Conrad. And I don't quite think I'm at Heart of Darkness levels quite yet. How he was able to do it, that's a brilliant man. How he was Polish, but able to write in French and gifted man. But nonetheless, it's still Spanish. It's definitely a Mexican story. It's about Mexican characters. It's basically Romeo and Juliet in the today, really, a modern version of Romeo and Juliet that takes place in Mexico City. And it's based on real things. And that story I'm immensely proud of. So that would be a direct result of immersing. Immersing to me is, it's that concept where once you try something that's better than something else, like, you can have Chapman's chocolate, and then you can have Ben and Jerry's half-baked cookie dough fudge chocolate. Once you have that, you can't go back to that boxed Chapman's where the box falls apart, or Neapolitan. You can't do it. So for me, immersing in other cultures with other people, to me, it's better than Ben and Jerry's. I can't go lower than that. The minute I get back there, I'm probably going to go to a bar.
I love it. It's awesome. So, Jonathan, how can we follow along on the journey? I'd love to share that with people so they can trace your steps and stay in contact.
Of course. My website is it's really easy. It's www.jonathanrrose.com. JONATHANRrose.com, all one word. All the links for all my books are there. That long list of my inspirations are there. Even links to the short stories I've had published by the Spadina Literary Review, the Danforth Review. They're there. Even other podcasts I've done and interviews and such are there. Some are in Spanish too. So for anybody that wants to hear me speak Spanish, it's there. And you can also follow me on Twitter. It's JonathanR_Rose.com. Not a big Twitter guy. I'm still trying to get used to it. But the links for all the social media stuff are on the website too. So definitely check out the website, JonathanRRose.com.
Excellent.
And my contact is there too. Anyone ever wants to contact me about my work or interested in whatever, hey, I like to immerse.
Beautiful.
Love a good conversation.
And if you're looking for somebody to have a great conversation at a local bar, here he is. Jonathan's here, and I would love to make that connection for anybody. Jonathan, thank you so much for taking time for us today. And again, I'm really following you with great interest, great curiosity. I'm looking forward to the next thing for you, because it sounds like there's a lot of great opportunities for you around the world, not just here in Canada. So it's awesome.
You never know which bar I'll end up on. So, but no, thank you very much. The Next Chapter podcast is great. I'm very happy to be a guest on it, and hopefully, maybe I get to have a chance to do it again.
Beautiful. We'd love to have you back. Thank you so much, Jonathan.
Take care, Dave.
Thank you. Hey guys, thank you for listening to the podcast. Jump over to livingthenextchapter.com, our website, and you will see a spot where you can leave a voice message. We'd love to hear your feedback. We're trying to make it as easy as possible to hear from you. So if you want your voice on this podcast, yes, that's possible. Go to livingthenextchapter.com, click the little microphone icon, leave a voice message. We'll insert your message into the podcast. Tell us where you're listening from. Tell us your favorite guest. Maybe there's a guest we should have on the podcast. Maybe you should be our next guest. Leave us a message at livingthenextchapter.com. Again, thank you so much for listening. Please share this podcast episode with one person. That's all we're asking. Meet you over there at livingthenextchapter.com. Thank you for listening. Thank you for sharing. Love to hear from you. Until the next episode, it's coming up right away. Be sure you hit that subscribe button. Thank you for being part of Living the Next Chapter. Thank you for supporting our guests. Have a great day.